would be important to clarify the fundamental difference between overstriding and a long stride length during running, since overstriding and a long stride length don't really have the same meaning. And I would also like to essentially discuss how foot strike pattern during running may greatly influence stride length. During running, you can have a long stride and not overstride and still perform exceptionally well with very minimal risk of injury. Mo Farah is a great example of a distance runner who has a longer stride than many of elite runners in his field. However, despite a longer stride length, Mo Farah doesn't technically overstride. In that light, a long stride length isn't necessarily a bad, disadvantaged mechanical trait. Rather, it's actually when you overstride during running that problems may certainly manifest, because the best available evidence makes the impressive case that overstriding during running may be a major risk factor for repetitive stress injury as well as impact related injuries. Overstriding is also a very common risk factor and a common mechanical trait typically associated with heel strike running, a running style which involves making initial ground contact on the heel. The action of overstriding may be one of the official reasons heel strike running may reach higher brake forces than forefoot strike running. Forefoot strike running meaning making initial ground contact on the balls of the foot. Since heel strike running most often involves overstriding, the high volumes of braking usually transcends greater mechanical loads on the leg, especially on the knee joint, which is why runner's knee is often accompanied by heel strike running via overstriding, as overstriding during heel strike running creates an excessive collision force between the body and the ground that may lead to unsafe exposure to a high brake force that may be prolonged in duration. Thus, more time may be spent in deceleration mode, which may chip away at the knee joint and may erode sustained running efficiency. It's this form of deceleration that may create difficulties in maintaining smooth, sustainable, energy efficient forward momentum and may unleash volumes of compressive forces on the knee joint. The long brake force duration may be one of the reasons heel strike running has been widely criticized for increasing vulnerabilities to injury, as we are quickly finding out that the long brake force duration typically associated with heel strike running may cause an influx of repetitive stress on the leg that could lead to injury. So what's the definition of overstriding during running anyway? Most experts will certainly agree that the official definition of overstriding in the context of running involves that at touchdown, when the foot strikes the ground, the ankle of the landing foot lands ahead of the knee, which looks like this. In overstriding during running, the foot ankle complex of the landing foot lands ahead of the entire body. To give you a more clear-eyed understanding with respects to the injury implications that may flow from overstriding during heel strike running, I posted a link down below in the description box of Christopher McDougall, author of the bestseller Born to Run. He beautifully illustrates and demonstrates how exactly the brake force is directly generated in heel strike running when overstriding is involved, and how it may lead to continuing mechanical assaults on the knee joint. Nonetheless, evidence tells us that this landing configuration of the foot ankle complex, that is, when the foot ankle complex is positioned ahead of the body and the knee joint at touchdown during heel strike running, could make you more prone to injury as compared with the foot ankle complex positioned under the knee or more closely to the knee and more closely to the body or the center of mass at touchdown, like it is so often in forefoot strike running. I must really underscore that when your ankle of the landing foot is planted way in front of the entire body and in front of the knee joint during running, normal impact peak forces really tend to be more pronounced and more amplified. It's this specific biomechanical variable of overstriding, which, according to much of the research, holds firm that the high impact nature of overstriding during heel strike running may be one of the primary mechanical components that distinguishes chronically injured runners from runners who rarely get injured on account of the natural consequences of overstriding. Specifically during heel strike running is reportedly greater downward force on the lower leg, more torque surging and piercing through the knee joint, because running this way is equivalent to slamming on the brakes for a very prolonged period of time, which also generates an impact peak magnitude that is a very well-known vulnerability consistently linked to most common running related injuries. That's really the hard truth. The impact magnitude from the prolonged brake period may also produce high joint loading on the ankle, knee, and hip, which may have a profoundly painful ripple effect on the rest of the body, which could not only disadvantage a runner's injury prevention efforts, but it may also jeopardize running economy. And here's why. When impact is too high during running, the muscles might need to work harder through ramping up their engagement to effectively attenuate and naturally dampen and deflect and absorb the high loading and shockwave spurred on by the brake force that commonly dominates overstriding in heel strike running. From a metabolic standpoint, the excessive need and reliability of the muscles to help effectively dampen the high impact of the prolonged brake force accompanied with overstriding while heel striking during running naturally requires an increase in muscle activation and an increase in muscle tuning to help phase out the shock wave spurred on by the prolonged brake force from overstriding in heel strike running. The intensive, persistent muscular engagement that may be required to help cope and effectively minimize the heavy impact load and shockwave that may flow from excessive hard-hitting braking at each step during heel strike running, while overstriding may demand greater energy costs to sustain, leading to the evolving understanding that heel strike running coupled with overstriding may essentially be metabolically expensive, and therefore it might be economically unfavorable on account of potentially being too labor intensive on the muscles, since the process of impact absorption within the muscles may demand extra energy to sustain, especially in high impact conditions, which could therefore place heel strike runners at a potentially distinct performance disadvantage compared to forefoot runners, runners who have a lighter load exchange of the body with the ground, since forefoot strike running may be associated with reduced overstriding, as it's a little difficult to overstride when you land on the front part of your foot when you run, or when you land on the balls of your foot when you run, versus landing heel first. I must highlight that landing on the front part of your foot or your forefoot during running, so forefoot striking, may naturally help prevent overstriding by helping your foot ankle complex land closer to your body. In contrast, the action of heel striking during running may make it easier for the foot ankle complex to be tossed out haphazardly farther ahead of the knee joint and the body, or the center of mass, as compared with forefoot striking during running. But also in forefoot strike running, to give you an even better chance at eliminating overstriding, bend your knee joint prior to touchdown on your forefoot, which essentially looks like this. Bending your knee joint at touchdown when your forefoot strikes the ground is the key mechanical connection that's gonna help draw the landing foot ankle complex to land closer to your center mass or your torso, which may be best for helping to prevent overstriding. This kind of leg swing activity had proven results and measurable effects on deterring overstriding and resolving high brake forces, to which ultimately may make forefoot striking during running one of the best mechanical solutions to help reduce impact-related injury. Aside from the notion that a long brake force duration may be an energy leak, thus a potential economical deficit, researchers suspect that it's the high brake impulse force in heel strike running while overstriding occurs at such high magnitudes it may push the muscles beyond their threshold and their capacity to effectively absorb impact loading, which may indeed accelerate the coercion of muscles and bones, potentially making the heel striking overstriding combination during running a primary precursor to injury, especially bone injuries, which is also why many skeptics of forefoot running are really beginning to rethink that heel strike running is a perfectly fine, acceptable way to run. Now, in that regard, researchers say that runners trying to recover from impact-related injuries should really avoid using a running style like heel strike running and overstriding, where the brake force is heavy and long in duration. Most, not all, but many heel strike runners are famously known for overstriding and thus generating a long brake force duration, and this style of running may be more closely linked to persistent injury as compared with forefoot strike running. But why do heel strike runners overstride anyway? The reason many heel strike runners tend to overstride is that to set up for heel strike during heel strike running, the swing leg swings out ahead of the body while the knee of the swing leg unbends and completely straightens out. The unbent or straightened out knee joint enables the swing leg to be flung out farther ahead of the body or the center of mass. It's the unbent or straightened out configuration of the knee joint prior to touchdown in heel strike running that may easily facilitate the foot ankle complex to swing out ahead of the center of mass, resulting in an elongated distance between initial foot strike position and the upper body, which is the center of mass in the context of running. This is how overstriding is created during heel strike running. Therefore, the center of mass, which again is the hips, torso, and head, are misaligned too far behind initial foot strike position. The long distance separation between the center of mass and initial foot strike position in overstriding during heel strike running may be the universal blame for generating the shock wave and immense collision force because of the exaggerated braking that's the byproduct of this mechanical arrangement, which may also increase loading on the leg, particularly on the knee joint, because at touchdown, the knee is most often unbent and locked into an unstable position, which can be a source of mechanical instability where compressive loads seem to have a stronger presence on the knee joint, since the knee is now in a vulnerable position where it bears and absorbs large quantities of mechanical stress. The knee joint may also be required to work harder in mechanical efforts to stabilize the foot ankle complex when the foot ankle complex lands too far out in front of the entire body, because the large distance separation between the foot ankle complex and the torso at touchdown in overstriding seems to be associated with the greatest amount of brake force and compressive loads, to which, since the center of mass is too far shifted behind the foot ankle complex at touchdown, the knee may need to work more intensively to move and pull the center of mass closer to initial foot strike position to help set up for the next step. You can begin to realize that this form of mechanical engagement of the knee joint can burn out the knee joint, potentially leading to knee burning pain and maybe a major risk factor for runner's knee. This positional alignment of the foot ankle complex relative to the knee joint at touchdown in overstriding in heel strike running may pose a danger, and it's a mechanical action that may be very largely ineffective because it unleashes an influx of a multitude of impact force variables that may directly increase tensile loads beyond the normal tolerable limit of the muscles and tendons within the knee joint, and eventually you may end up with a knee injury. If you continue to run in this way, that is, heel striking during running coupled with overstriding, you may increasingly face the risk of repetitive stress injury and repetitive impact related injuries because of the magnitude of the brake force. Not to mention, the brake force may continue to pile up and deepen in intensity with increased running speed and increased running distance if overstriding is maintained during heel strike running. Furthermore, traditionally, scientists believe cushioned traditional running shoes play a major role in adequate impact absorption, but let's really face up to the trend lines in that it's an old-fashioned idea that cushioned running shoes fully provides impact protection. How can cushioned running shoes fully absorb all the impact during heel strike running while overstriding if there's a growing trend of impact-related injury in runners in parallel with increasingly advanced running shoe technology and underfoot cushioning? In fact, the trend lines show the greater the underfoot padding, the harder the runner strikes the ground, and the risk of impact-related injury rises. It's important to point out that a growing body of evidence with undeniable results have found that if you land with a heel strike during running, especially while overstriding, that is, striking the ground heel first while your knee is completely unbent, a long brake force duration is and will be produced to its fullest and may be an ongoing struggle in the context of injury prevention despite wearing the thickest cushion running shoe available. Luckily, you possess the natural capacity to reduce the brake force on account of making just a few mechanical modifications that I'll go into detail momentarily, but ultimately I really just wanted to give you a more clear-eyed view of that you can have an elongated stride like Mo Farah during running and still run within safe, tolerable limits of impact generation. Just don't overstride and give yourself a mechanically hard time when you don't really have to. And again, the recipe for overstriding most often involves landing heel first while the knee is completely straight at touchdown. This is why I really think mechanically forefoot strike running may have greater injury prevention value with bigger economical payoffs because the brake force duration is shortened, it's reduced, which may mean the muscles may be less intensively engaged in working to minimize and absorb the brake force as compared with heel strike running when overstriding is involved. Because of the significant drop in brake force duration, forefoot strike running may really stand out in advancing a runner's injury prevention efforts, since forefoot striking is one of the main drivers for naturally reducing stride length. Now, even though I just stated a few times, Mo Farah has a longer stride than most of the elite runners in his field, he doesn't overstride because he doesn't show that hard-hitting, prominent heel strike landing pattern, and he typically tends to keep both of his knees bent, especially when he's running on the track. Despite executing a longer stride length, Mo Farah does not overstride because the ankle of his landing foot typically lands closely to his knee. There is also a shorter spatial distance between his center of mass or his upper body and his initial foot strike position, which are relevant mechanical strategies to effectively manage less braking. And that's a good reason why you don't hear too much of Mo Farah being sidelined with an impact running related injury. His knee bending and non-heel strike landing pattern are part of the core frameworks for his success as an endurance distance runner. I can't stress this enough that as long as the ankle of your landing foot lands close to your knee joint at touchdown, and your upper body is moved closer to initial foot strike position. So by leaning a little more forward, you end up with a shorter distance between initial foot strike position and your center of mass. These positional and mechanical parameters may help effectively dilute a high brake force and may lead up to the effort in helping achieve pain-free or injury-free running, because long-term injury prevention depends largely on how you use your mechanical effectiveness to minimize impact forces. Just to reiterate, forefoot striking during running may be a strategically relevant mechanical action that may encourage the foot to land more closely under the knee and your center of mass, and certainly bending your knee joint while landing on your forefoot does an even better job at properly aligning your ankle under or closer to your knee joint at touchdown. Therefore, landing with the forefoot strike while keeping both knees softly bent may really give you a better chance at avoiding overstriding. And it's this magical combination of landing with the forefoot strike with the knee bent during running that helps keep the brake force in much shorter duration and less impact flows through the leg. It's for this reason I really like to consider forefoot strike running as a safety valve that may help restrict prolonged brake forces and impact shock wave propagation. Because of this, forefoot striking during running is really making headway and potentially being a sensible approach in a long-term solution to drain away injurious brake forces, potentially helping you avoid performance shortcomings and injury setbacks. However, most importantly, helping you avoid the consequences of a long brake force duration that is the signature byproduct of overstriding in heel strike running. Always remember, in heel strike running, brake forces dominate, but that's not the case in forefoot strike running, and it's the duration of the brake force that really is one of the defining distinctions between forefoot striking and heel striking during running. For this reason, it's important to see the performance and health benefits of forefoot strike running versus heel strike running, not to mention more recent studies add to the evolving understanding that forefoot strike running seems to be one of the proven solutions to the problem of a long brake force duration. And of course, the results really do speak for themselves. Studies after study after study have shown that heel strike runners who adopted a forefoot strike running style had reduced risk of impact-related injury and a reduced risk of runner's knee, simply because there's less tendency to overstride and there's less repeated exposure to a long brake force. Thus, if you can avoid overstriding and thus run with a shortened brake force duration period, as in forefoot strike running, you are on a real roll in making real progress in strengthening your injury prevention efforts. This is why forefoot strike running is an excellent way to potentially weaponize your mechanical efficiency. I also posted a link down below in the description box showing the proper demonstration of a forefoot strike landing pattern during running. I hope you've enjoyed this video. To stay updated on the latest research regarding the health and performance benefits of forefoot running and barefoot running, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Have fun out there on the roads and trails. Bye for now.